We are now recording the start of the workshop. And so again, thank you to everyone for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. I want to first, introduce and also thank all of the collaborators who helped this workshop on. So I specifically want to call out folks from the Nature Conservancy Colorado chapter, Catherine Schlegel, and Parker Titus. Parker's not here with us today. Austin Rempel and Libby Pansing from American Forests, Josh Sloan from New Mexico Highlands University, Owen Burney from New Mexico State University, and then Brooke Simmons from CFRI, and I am also from CFRI. So my name is Marion Chambers. I am a research associate at the Colorado Forest Restoration Institute at Colorado State University, and I'll be kind of guiding us through our conversation today. So first, I want to just kind of go through again the purposes and objectives of this workshop, and really to reiterate that this workshop is really designed to gather information from you all about the needs, opportunities, future research, and policy directions relating to native conifer seed collection, processing, and storage, specifically for reforestation or afforestation purposes. So I just want to make sure everybody knows this is not a tutorial workshop. Rather, we're really looking for active input from you all to really identify some of these, critical needs in our region. So our plan is to summarize the needs that we discussed today, as well as some of the resources that we collectively identified today, and use this information to share widely. And particularly what we're interested in doing is sharing the video that we have as a discussion today. Our workshop hosts or facilitators are going to generate a 2 to 6 page document capturing some of the highlights out of our discussion. And that will be planned to be shared widely. And specifically, I think there's many people on the call, not just the 6 of us facilitators, but are really interested in, generating plans or ideas for additional workshops, tutorials, research, and identifying funding and policy needs to communicate that to the appropriate people. So that's really the objectives today. And more specifically, we really also wanted to provide an opportunity for land managers in the Southwest to connect and discuss their questions and concerns around native conifer seed collection, processing, and storage. And again, we will be providing all of you your collective contact information so that you have the opportunity to connect with each other following this workshop. Again, if you do not want that information shared, please send myself or Brooke Simmons a personal note, and we'll make sure that your personal information is not shared. And that would primarily be essentially your name, role, organization, state, and then an email contact. We also wanted to, through this workshop, identify the existing resources, information, data sets, funding, and policies that might support seed collection, processing, and storage, and identify the needs of the current and future cone collectors to inform, possibly a regional strategy, resources, policy, and research gaps. So today we're going to have, a quick introduction that we're working through right now. Austin Rempel from American Forests is going to just give us a broad overview for the need for a workshop such as this. Then as a group, we will do a Post-it note exercise, kind of detailing for each one of us what the greatest challenges, concerns, or questions that we have really around seed collection, processing, and storage around 6 major themes: science and adaptation, logistical situations, business and economic challenges, collaborative or cooperative needs, skills and vocational training, and then resources and policy. Then we'll have a short break, and then we'll come back for about an hour-long group discussion where we'll kind of dive in and drill down a little bit more into these kind of most common or collective challenges that we're seeing from the Post-it note exercise. We'll take another short break, and then we'll go into some breakout groups where we dig even deeper into what some of these biggest needs or gaps are, and specifically, how do we prioritize addressing those needs? Then we'll come back, we'll have a short report out following the breakout groups. We'll have another short discussion where we collectively identify existing resources to address these challenges. And then we'll close right around 4:30 today. So just some rules for the road. Please mute your microphone and raise your hand to add any thoughts. We will be looking for your hands for sure. Control background noise to the best of your ability. Please be an active listener and also contributor to the conversation. I personally have a hard time with this, so I'm putting this in here more for myself than anyone else, but as much as you can, minimize multitasking and really try to stay present. Minimizing jargon. There's a lot of people here from a lot of different agencies and states. So as much as we can use common language, that would be really helpful. Everyone's thoughts are equally valued, and I really want us all to respect our differences. And I really believe that there's no such thing as a bad question, or in this particular case, or a bad idea. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Austin to give us sort of a broad overview of why we are having this workshop. So thank you and welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Maren. Now let's see if I can share my screen again. What are we seeing, folks? Are we seeing the presentation?
We're seeing your presentation now.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Austin.
All right, thank you. So Austin Rempel, Director of Forest Restoration at American Forests. I'm based up in Durango, or down in Durango for a lot of you. And I'm going to be presenting on the big picture, the status of the seed collection and reforestation pipeline in the Southwest to get everyone's juices kind of flowing on this issue. And I want to acknowledge the big brain trust behind this effort, in particular, Maren Chambers. She has been herding cats for over a year making this happen. So thank you so much, Maren. And I'm forgetting how to change slides. Okay, here we go. So we do want to frame things up in terms of the reforestation pipeline. Seed is the start of that, is the foundation of that. No seed, no trees. And the reason we want to frame it up this way is there is a big focus on seedlings. Seedlings are a lot of public conversation, but people don't realize all the steps that happen before the seedling and after the seedling. So I want to step through that really quickly. To have successful reforestation in this system, we need seed. We need seed bank managers who know how to keep the seed from going bad, to keep the inventory. We need good seed banks. We need nursery folks who know how to run these major facilities and grow millions of trees a year like a crop. We need outplanting, people who can plant thousands of trees a day. We need post-planting care. We can't just stick a seedling green side up in the ground and expect it to survive in a lot of landscapes. So there's all these things around seedlings that we need to be aware of in reforestation. And why are we talking about this? So we back up a few years ago, around 2019, we started to talk about reforestation in the whole country, and Nature Conservancy put some numbers behind it, looking at what would it take to reforest after all the fires we're experiencing, recovering from disease, from the history and legacy of deforestation during colonization. All of these different factors taking out trees. And they identified after a big mapping exercise that there are about 148 million acres that are ready for reforestation, that could use reforestation. And that would take 76 billion seedlings. And they just updated this analysis, and the number actually went up. So it's not only accurate, it's true. So we need a lot of seedlings. And around that time that these numbers started to come out, we started to ask, is the reforestation pipeline in a place that we can actually get to somewhere close to these numbers? And that eventually resulted in all of us joining forces and producing this Challenges to the Reforestation Pipeline in the United States. It's a good paper, fairly short for what it is, worth the read. And so as part of that, I had an opportunity to talk, as part of this group, we had an opportunity to survey nursery managers and seed collectors across the US. And one thing at a national level, seed didn't really come up as one of the top issues. It was kind of trailing bottom. But one place it did come up was in the Southwest. Nursery managers and seed collectors in Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona were saying this is one of the top issues. We're not going to be able to grow anywhere near what you're saying we want to grow without more seed and a better seed collection system. So that came across very clearly, and it was confirmed in that same year. National Association of State Foresters did a similar survey where it came top of mind again. And I mentioned this because 3 years later, the rest of the nation has caught up. If you talk to nursery managers and stuff in far-flung places like the lake states, they're all saying that seed is a major issue. So it was kind of a forecast. It was ahead of its time, really, the Southwest, and it has not really gotten better. The seed situation is still a hard barrier for reforestation. And I wanted to try and put some numbers behind this, for better, for worse. So starting with a Colorado example, Colorado specific, the 2020 fires burned about 660,000 acres in the mountains. And that's about 3 times our usual average. It's about 226,000 acres a year between 2012 and 2020. So if we were just to say, what would it take to reforest 10% of that acreage? Assuming we're doing it mostly with ponderosa pine and Douglas fir, that would take around 17 million seedlings, But, and if we compare this to the seed we have in the seed banks, how far would that get us? And looking across all the seed banks that serve Colorado specifically, we have enough ponderosa pine and Douglas fir to grow 12.5 million seedlings total. So we're basically 1 year away from having no seed. And there are a lot of caveats in this number. We discussed it a lot. You know, in one way, it's extremely optimistic because basically seed transfer guidelines. There's no saying we have a certain number of pounds of seed in the seed banks, but there's no saying that they would be appropriate for that part of the fire scar. But 1-to-1, this is what it would look like. We don't have that much seed for what's a bad year. And it's also somewhat conservative because we do have lodgepole pine and Engelmann spruce seed, bunches of it. So that would maybe buy us some more time. But either way, as Maren put it, we're in hot water any way you look at it. We are not prepared for average years, much less bad years. And you ought to think too that our average year here, our average fire summer, is adding 5.5 million seedlings in need. So this is kind of a funny exercise. We're not all on board with thinking about it this way, but the numbers just aren't there to reforest the way we want to. So what's behind this? There are a lot of different reasons, and this is getting into the discussion, the meat of the discussion today. We're hoping to figure out what all of you think of this. Why is this happening? But I'll throw out a few. One, climate change. Fires are taking out, in some cases, I think entire genotypes. They're taking out forests, they're taking out a lot of the mature trees that produce seed. And this is in tandem with drought, disease, beetles. So we're sort of losing our seed producing trees. And at the same time, the trees that are left are stressed. Ponderosa pine, for example, only produces crops, big crops, good crops every 7 years. And that is becoming less frequent with climate change when they're stressed and not getting enough water. And so they're becoming less frequent, less predictable, and the crops themselves are also lower quality. We're seeing lower germination rates, fewer filled cells and cones. Bugs are getting at them sooner. And we're also seeing this concerning trend of crop abortion. So it'll look like we're on tracking for a good crop. And then we get there, we collect, and it turns out that they called it off at the 11th hour. So quality is also a real concern here. In tandem, we're having workforce we're suffering from this legacy of workforce and infrastructure decline. And there were never really many seed collectors to begin with, and a lot of them are retiring at this exact moment when we need more than we've ever had, and they need to be better than they've ever been. We need to be more trained to incorporate a lot of the climate science we have now. So we don't have enough people who know how to collect seed. That's clear. And there's this long legacy of infrastructure decline. Luckily, we didn't lose all of our nurseries in the Southwest the way some regions did, but they're in disrepair. They need investments. They're dealing with old equipment, and it's hard to find people who know how to grow the crops at the scale we need. Lastly, cross-boundary, cross-jurisdictional issues. We are not good at these things. We're all very siloed. So State folks will focus on their plot of land. Forest Service will focus on the issues they have on their land. But what's needed is sort of cross-boundary, cross-jurisdictional collaboration. That's hard. I've seen it work very well in some states where they call each other when one has a seed collection opportunity, they share seed. But in many places in Southwest, we're not really set up for that. So my takeaways from this, and again, this is just my set, I'm interested in yours, and I hope you disagree with some of these, but we need a lot more seed, and it can't just be any seed. We need it to be climate smart. We need it to support kind of our assisted migration ideas and everything we see about the climate coming. We know that there are trees that can deal with that. So we need to be collecting those seeds and moving them around in a smart way. We need to build species, seed zone, and genetic diversity in our seed banks. And part of this is not just collecting from the same old trees that we used to collect from, the tall, straight ones, the good timber ones. We need those survivors, the scrappy, small ones that maybe have a genetic playbook for dealing with the climate in 50 years. We need processes, seed zone mapping. We need seed zones to start. We need institutions to be better at, seed banks that can talk to each other and people that know how to run these things. We need an excellent workforce. We need a lot more people, and they need to be flexible to focus on this for those very seasonal portions of the year when cone crops, maybe have a week to get the cones before they open and the seeds before they get eaten. We also needed it yesterday with the framing that trees take a very long time to produce seed, like with that Ponderosa example, 7 years. We should have been looking decades ago to capture these very rare opportunities. But I do think this is actually achievable. I wanted to end on a note of hope, because if we look over the past 3 years, there's been a lot of progress on this in a very short period of time. The issue is gaining broader recognition. We were in National Geographic, the seed collection issue. There's been a lot of news coverage. National funding is kind of stepping up to the extent that nurseries and seed collection were in the infrastructure bill. We passed the Replant Act. Inflation Reduction Act had a national seed strategy penned in. State funding is equally encouraging. State legislatures funded the New Mexico Reforestation Center, a first of its kind effort. The Colorado State Forest Service just got funding for a nursery upgrade to bring that into the next century. And lastly, there are some encouraging workforce models. In California, we will, as of August, we will have tripled the number of seed collectors out there and nursery folks. So there is kind of a room for a civilian conservation corps like model supporting nursery and infrastructure. And lastly, this is just mine, but I think the regions that have seed orchards, that invested in seed orchards decades ago, they are doing much better than anyone else. So we should probably work on that immediately. If not, go back in time and plant seed orchards. So this is all my framing. I hope it's helpful. And I hope we're on time. And I'll hand that over to whoever's next.
Thank you so much, Austin. That's great. And I really appreciate your perspective on it. Wow, 76 billion seedlings is a lot. That's really, when you frame it like that, it's pretty amazing. And thank you for sharing the Colorado example from your eyes, kind of more broadly across all landscapes. Very interesting. And you're actually a couple minutes early, so great. So now we're going to move into the post-it note portion of our workshop. So we've got about the next 20-25 minutes where Brooke, I'm going to have you pull up the whiteboard for us. And Brooke will kind of talk with us about, how we're going to do this. But essentially, we have these 6 major themes that we're thinking through of, how exactly to tackle this problem that I think Austin just did a really beautiful job of illustrating some of the challenge that we're facing. So the major themes that we've kind of developed for us all to think through some of the challenges is science and adaptation, logistical challenges, business or economics. We've lost our whiteboard, Brooke. Okay.
Can you see this now?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yes.
Then the collaborative and cooperative needs, skills and vocational training, and resources and policy. And we also have kind of a parking lot section over here in case we've missed something. So I'm going to let Brooke walk through how to do the Post-it note exercise, and then we'll go ahead and get started with a little bit more explanation from me in just a moment. But Brooke, could you kind of illustrate for everyone how they can actually illustrate some of their questions, concerns, or considerations using these sticky notes?
Yes, absolutely. So in the whiteboard feature, we're going to be using the sticky notes. On the left side of your screen, it's the 6th icon down. It looks like a little sticky note with the corner pulled back. You can click on that and you can place your sticky note anywhere on the screen. You have the option to enhance the size. And then if you click within that sticky note, you should see your cursor start blinking. You can now enter your text. And if you want to move it around, you should have the arrows that are multi-directional, and you can move that sticky note anywhere. You will have the ability to move other people's sticky notes. I'm going to ask that you please don't move them unless you're one of our facilitators. And if you have any questions with the sticky notes, please let me know. And then I guess the only other thing, if you're using a mouse or the trackpad on your laptop, you can zoom in with the trackpad on your laptop by pushing your fingers apart from each other. And with your mouse, you can zoom around and whoops, don't want to move that. But you can.
Hey, Brooke, sorry to interrupt you, but
yeah,
we can't see anything on your screen. It's just like a blank screen.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Can you see the whiteboard on your screen?
No, it's just like a gray screen.
I can see the whiteboard, but it's really
Oh,
big.
interesting.
It's like really zoomed.
So
Can't see the whole thing.
yeah, so there's a little icon at the bottom, if you can see the whiteboard, that has the ability to zoom in or zoom out. So you'll individually be able to see this, and you can zoom in and zoom out. But I guess, could I ask for a show of hands for people who cannot see the whiteboard? Just by raising your hand. Interesting.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I can try unsharing and then sharing this again.
Let's try that. Thank you,
Yeah.
Brooke.
Yeah, absolutely. Seems to be about half and half. Half of the folks can see it, half can't. So let's see if this works.
I'm wondering if it makes a difference whether you shared on the web, or whether you joined on the web or joined through the app.
That's a good point. If you're on your phone, you might need to scroll a page so that you can see the whiteboard. Scroll to like the left or the right.
Okay, so Brooke has just reshared this. For those who still cannot see it, can you raise your hand? Okay.
Interesting. For those that have your hand raised, are you joining through the web or through the app?
Through the web.
Okay.
Okay.
What do you see on your end? It's just a blank screen?
Just a gray screen.
It's gray.
Okay. I think the way that we will try to just go about solving this for those of you who cannot see it is I'm going to put the major themes, and then if you could message Brooke Simmons any comments that you're having, Brooke could go ahead and put those on a Post-it note for you. Does that sound okay with you, Brooke?
Yeah, that works for me. And I enabled the chat, so you should be able to add the chat, add your text into the chat again.
And I'm just going to add those 6 themes here in the chat so that everybody can see them. In the meantime, it looks like, many folks are kind of getting the hand of this. I do want to say that these Post-its are not anonymous. People can, if they really want to, figure out who put the note. But so if you would like to have an anonymous comment or concern, feel free to message myself or Brooke around any of these themes. But otherwise, there is no limitation on how many comments you can put up. So my hope is that everyone just starts to put in, based on some of these themes, some of the things that they have been thinking about. And if you're brand new to seed collection, like many of us on this call are, I think that your insights are some of the most important in terms of really understanding from someone who's approaching this without a lot of experience or information, what some of your biggest challenges, questions, or considerations are around these themes. So go ahead, we've got about another 20 minutes for this exercise. The facilitators are going to be looking at each of these themes and kind of pulling out some of the biggest, more common challenges that we're seeing, and then we'll kind of report out on this collectively. So have fun. Thank you so much for all your insights. Any other questions at the moment before we really dive into this?
Yeah, so if those ones that can't see the screen, at the very bottom, there's this of this bar, I guess, there's a 1 and a 2. If you click on that, then it will show like a blank screen and the sticky note screen. Just
Oh,
FYI.
great. Okay. I don't see that. So thank you so much for offering that. That was Casey, right? Thank you. Appreciate
Yes.
it. Yeah, hopefully that works for some other folks as well.
No help for me.
I'm sorry, Dean. But if you want to pass some of your comments to myself or Brooke, we're happy to add them for you or just to incorporate those.
You want me to do this in the chat, or?
Sure, that would be great.
I don't see another way to do it.
The chat
Yeah.
will be perfect.
Yes, thank you.
Good grief.
Or Dean, if it's easier for you, I'll put my email address into the chat and you can just email me directly if that's an easier way to go about it.
Okay. Yeah, whatever works. If something will work, that's the right thing.
So Dean, I just put my email at the very bottom of the chat.
Well, let me try again. Okay, got it.
If you are just joining the conversation, you can add your sticky notes of major challenges, concerns, and considerations to these 6 main theme areas using a sticky note. And that's a bar on the left-hand side of the screen. The 6th icon down is a sticky note that looks like a little square with a little tab turned up on the right-hand side. And you can just pull that over and then add your text. Well, personally, I'll throw in here, this is really interesting to see some of the comments that you all are making. Thank you for all of your wonderful insights. We really appreciate it. So I'm just going to also comment, this is so interesting, not adding, thinking about anything, but there's a lot of comments on science and adaptation, loads of comments on logistical, and kind of fewer comments on resources and policy and skills and vocational training. So if you haven't gotten to those and you really want to, we still have plenty of time. But, you know, lots of interesting things to think about around these themes. We do have about 10 more minutes. If you are having a hard time seeing all of the topics, go to the lower right part of the screen. You'll see a magnifying glass that says a minus sign or a plus sign, and you can zoom out, and so you can see everything. I think that should hopefully help. Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left. This is so amazing. Thank you all so much for all these amazing concerns and questions and considerations. Really exciting to see these thoughts. I do see over on the left-hand side, there's some really great comments, and I'm curious if these were intended to be in a parking lot area. And if they're not, you know, if it's your comment, go ahead and move it to where you see it being best suited. Just so we're sure that we capture everything that you were intending.
So 2 of those comments I wrote based on some direct messages. I'm not sure where those need to go though.
Great. Thank you, Brooke.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got about 3 minutes left for this. Okay, let's take 1 more minute and close it up.
Is there something that we can, you know, some kind of framework we can use to target trees that are likely to be resistant now, even though we don't have like
Do you have your audio on? Because I just heard you talking. I'm like,
shoot.
Okay. I think it's close to 1:50, and so, you know, feel free to continue adding to this if you'd like, but we'll take a 10-minute break and we will come back at 2 o'clock and we will start to have our facilitators digest some of this. We're going to highlight 2 to 5 of the most important kind of major concerns or considerations that were coming out of each of these themes. And then we'll have a larger group discussion around these themes to just dive a little bit more deeply into it. So we will see you back here at 2 o'clock. That's about 10 minutes. And thank you all so much for all of the amazing insights on all of this. We really appreciate it.
Excuse me, I know you're on break, but can I ask a quick question?
Sure, Chris, sorry, who are you asking?
You're
I'm just totally lost on this whiteboard thing. When I logged in today, it updated my Zoom to the most current Zoom. At least it told me it did. But where are you looking for this? You say down the left side. I have nothing down the left side of my screen.
Brooke, is this something you could address?
Yeah, Chris, you're not the only one. I had a couple comments from people saying that they also don't have a navigation bar on the left side of their screen. And so I was trying to Google it right now so I can figure out why some folks are having different viewing capabilities. And I apologize, I don't know why, off the top of my head, why you wouldn't have that navigation bar. But I'm gonna look into it real quick and I hope to have an answer when we come back from break.
All right. I even left the meeting and came back with the link that was sent me a week ago, as opposed to the one that was sent today, and it was the same thing. That helps at all.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Let me see
I
what
just
I
want
can
to make sure when we start discussing stuff, I can see what's going on, because I'm
Yeah.
just feeling a little lost. All right, thanks.
Yeah.
This is Mindy Gottsagen. I'm the same as happened to me. I can't access it. I've used it in the past. I don't know why I can't see it.
Sorry about that, Mindy. And if you have any specific things you'd like us to capture, please go ahead and just directly message either myself. I think Brooke actually is probably the better person to do at this point. That would be really helpful if there's anything specific that you'd like to
Are there categories? I mean, it sounds like there's categories. I don't even know what they are, but
there are, and I added those a little bit ago in the Zoom chat. And there's 6 of them. They are, I'll add those again now towards the bottom so you don't have to scroll all the way through.
okay, thanks.
It looks like it has to do with an update. This is perhaps maybe an updated Zoom feature. I see a comment in the chat that says somebody switched to a computer that had an updated Zoom and they were able to see everything.
Okay, thanks.
Marion, I'm going to turn off the whiteboard for now so I can open up Google.
Can you actually wait? I'm sorry, I haven't had a second to even look at mine.
Oh, sure, no worries.
Thank you so much. Okay, Brooke, I think I'm okay.
Okay, and I just realized I can actually open up Google without it sharing that screen,
Okay.
so I don't need to close it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why don't we hold on to it just in case any of the other facilitators are still looking at theirs too.
Okay, that works. And it does seem to be, I'm researching it, and it seems to be the different viewing capabilities are related to the most updated Zoom. So it sounds like maybe folks might need to update their Zoom. There could have been an update within the past couple of weeks, and hopefully that is the reason why some people are having different viewing capabilities.
Cool, thank you. So Brooke, I think at this point, we're not going to be using Post-it anymore. So for our purposes, I don't know that anybody needs to go and update since we're going to be closing this whiteboard pretty soon. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Brooke, I'm thinking that while we're starting this, I'm going to have myself and the other facilitators, maybe with the exception of Owen, because I don't know if he'll have enough time to write everything out on the new whiteboard template that we're kind of talking about some of the major themes that maybe we'll just have the facilitators write out their own Post-it note. But maybe you could help Owen because he'll be the first of us. I'm not sure if he'll have the time to write it all out. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, that works.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get started again. Brooke is going to close this Post-it note exercise out, and I really am so appreciative of everyone's amazing insights and thoughts. Brooke is going to start a new whiteboard exercise, and really that's just for us to kind of have the facilitators illustrate some of the most common things that we were seeing on those Post-it notes by each theme. So there's no need for you to put any more Post-it notes unless you feel really, really inspired. But I think what we'll do is we will start with the top left corner with Owen. Owen, if you want to get on Zoom, introduce yourself really quickly, and then kind of identify some of the most common themes verbally, and then we can write those out as well. And Brooke can either help you or you can add those in as you see fit. So go ahead, Owen.
Thanks, Maren. For those who don't know me, my name is Owen Burney, and I am director of the John T. Harrington Forestry Research Center and professor at New Mexico State University. So my topic that I'm facilitating is science and adaptation. And going through all the Post-it notes, I kind of came up with three main messages. There was a lot on there. And so if I am not calling yours out, I just want you to know that they're all important. So these are just the quick themes that I was able to pull away. So the first one I want to talk about is the importance of expanding and creating new seed zones and transfer guidelines for a range of species as that relates to a changing climate. So making sure that we incorporate assisted migration as an element of what we're doing. So if you need me to state that again, Brooke, let me know. I can also readjust those notes later. How's that? So if you get the main point down, I'll be able to adapt it later. How's that? Okay.
That works.
The second one ties into the first one, and that is we need to establish more provenance and carbon garden studies for, of course, the heavy hitter species that we're all working with, but I think it for a range of species as well. So it ties into the seed zone and seed transfer guidelines, because from those studies we can actually build out a better understanding of how we can move seed around. And the last one is a need for predicting or modeling cone production, and possibly introducing some remote monitoring systems that will allow us to know when cones are becoming available, so that we're, ground crews are kind of minimized. So I think those are the three big takeaways from the science and adaptation as it relates to seed collection and storage and processing. There was a lot more in there, but I think those are the three that I'm going to stick with right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Owen. Really appreciate it. So why don't we go to the logistical considerations, and Catherine, could you sort of frame out some of the most important ones that you either were commonly seeing or seem to really encapsulate some of the biggest concerns? And again, Owen, I really appreciate you saying that every Post-it note was important, but right now we're just kind of trying to identify some of the biggest considerations that were commonly coming up. And Catherine,
Yeah.
you also introduce yourself. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's so wonderful to see so many old friends and new faces. My name is Catherine Schlegel, and I work at the Nature Conservancy here in Colorado. And as many of you know, I think seeds are my passion. I've learned a lot from many of you here on the phone, and it's very exciting to continue this learning journey. So I wanted to pick out some of the top themes. There was a lot of really good comments on the logistics. One that floated to the top, I saw several times, was about a centralized reporting hub, which would house information about scouting and where cones are being produced. The second sort of major theme I saw related to labor. We had a bunch of different comments, the need for new contracting models, an insufficient contract labor force, ideas around growing internal agency capacity, an exploration of how volunteers could be used, and many comments about quality. So I'll just leave it as labor, and that flows into both this cone collection part of the supply chain, but also into the processing and storage. And the third one that I'm gonna land on is access, which I saw several times. I saw comments about access to federal and private lands, the opportunity to identify key seed production areas, and many comments about seed orchards. So I'll leave it there with centralized reporting hub, labor, and access. Many great ideas that I look forward to following up on in our next session. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Marion.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Catherine. So many amazing things there. So the next one was the theme around business and economics. And Austin, could you go ahead and just reintroduce yourself for those folks who may not have been on the workshop call when you presented at the start of the workshop, and then kind of identify some of the themes that you were seeing.
Absolutely. So Austin Rempel, Director of Forest Restoration down in Durango. And on the business and economics side, we had a lot of consistency, which is nice. We're all thinking the same thing. So first one was incentive and wage structures aren't really good to entice people to enter and stay in the industry. The labor market just really isn't working. Reliance on public funding is not always good. Pricing, how do we do it? And is it accurate and transparent? Seed is invisible in comparison to planting, especially on the private funding side. So A few folks mentioned that corporations, it really isn't aligned with their communication style and dollar per tree model in particular. Unpredictability with seed production cycles and budget cycles is a big one. So funding cycles don't align with when trees want to produce seed. And I think just on the first one, the incentive and wage structures is also the nature of seasonal work is an economic one as well. And those are the ones that popped out immediately, but we'll take another look to make sure nothing's lost. Thanks for everyone that left some good comments there.
Awesome. Thanks, Austin. Okay, so the next major theme that we were looking at was the collaborative and cooperative needs. And Libby, would you mind introducing yourself and just identifying some of the most common themes that you are seeing?
Not at all. Hi, everyone. My name is Libby Pansing. I am the Director of Forest and Restoration Science at American Forest. Thrilled to be here with everyone and just listen to all of the great ideas, suggestions, and roadblocks that you all are running into. So for the collaborative and cooperative needs portion, we really had 4 major themes that percolated to the top. The first is really just developing messaging campaigns to raise awareness about the need for seed and how that that is consistent across all jurisdiction and is not specific to one type. So we need that to highlight that that need is on public lands, it's on private lands, it is everywhere. So just getting that message out to try to kind of change that social perspective. And then 2 and 3 are really kind of 2 sides of the same coin, but I'm going to separate them. So the first is really more of a social constraint of how do we work effectively together. So how do we develop the willingness to share seed across jurisdictions? How do we develop shared goals that everybody agrees on? How do we communicate effectively across these different jurisdictions? So really those kind of, in my perspective, encapsulate those kind of social barriers that might make it challenging to do it. The second is really kind of the technical or process-based aspects that could present challenges for identifying some of those opportunities for collaborating across jurisdictions. So how do we actually develop those processes? What kind of co-ops can we develop? What does that structure of a co-op need to look like? What kinds of agreements do we need to implement and develop in order to actually get access to other land ownership types? Those kinds of constraints. And then lastly, one of the consistent ones that came up was just how do we mobilize all of this given the temporal constraints that appear with cone production. So whether that's interannual variation or just being ready to go at the drop of a dime once cones are ripe and ready to collect, how do we actually do that from a cross-jurisdictional perspective? And I'll leave it there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Libby. Okay, so I was looking at the next theme, which is skills and vocational training, and there was so many great insights there. But the kind of major themes that I was looking at was essentially just this theme of that there's a lack of contractors generally, and really a need to get more people trained, you know, pretty much immediately. And so then a lot of it was then questions about how to do that and how to do that effectively. So specifically, a lot of questions around how to balance long-term career opportunities by various levels of education. So questions around whether or not on-the-job training is what's really needed, or if, you know, some of the people who are going to be doing this kind of work need college degrees and the full 4-year education. Then a lot of other questions around accessibility of trainings for people at what looked like a lot of different organizations and agency levels. So that's another really interesting piece. And specifically, some of the comments were not just accessibility of trainings, but whether or not the trainings were really effective or understandable to the audience who is consuming those. And then also some interesting comments on, you know, what the most effective means of cone collection are and how to do training specifically geared towards that. And I think, you know, Austin brought up some really great comments in his presentation at the beginning of the workshop thinking about both large scale reforestation, but also cone collection for conservation purposes. And so I think there's some really interesting questions there about, how do we do those two things simultaneously or in tandem? So those were some of the great comments. And there's, like I said, many more. So now I'll jump to Josh Sloan. Do you mind introducing yourself and then also identifying some of the kind of high level common themes that were coming out of the resources and policy theme?
Sure. Thanks, Maren. Joshua Sloan with New Mexico Highlands University. I'm a forestry professor here, and along with some others on the call, including Owen, part of the group that's starting up the New Mexico Reforestation Center. So I'm one of the fortunate or unfortunate few here that have some Zoom issues with the whiteboard functions. So about half of the Post-it notes actually showed up blank for me, which is kind of weird. So the summary I've got here is pulled off of what I was able to see, but I think on the resources and policy, the biggest thing I saw coming up, which really isn't surprising for those of us that have worked in collection across different land ownerships, was access. I think that's probably the biggest high level theme there. But then kind of as subheadings under that are the questions about jurisdiction, mechanisms for that access. So we can kind of break down into what that looks like. And then we had some comments in there, in addition to the jurisdiction, about establishing designated collection sites, which kind of overlaps with agency coordination there, as well as establishment of local reforestation centers. And so I think we can kind of categorize those as, I guess as relates to policy, things that can often be downstream functions of policy, where policy dictates agency direction, dictates mechanisms, dictates funding opportunities. And so I think there's a lot of interesting room for conversation there.
Awesome.
All right.
Great, thank you. So we just wanted to sort of illustrate some of these common themes that were coming out of the 6 theme areas. And then really we have 45 minutes to hear from you about some of the additional things that you might have to comment about any one of these things, dive in a little bit more to maybe a post-it that you had put up here that you'd like to share with the group. We would just really love to hear from you all about what your biggest concerns and considerations are and what you might need in order to get to a place where you feel like you can do seed collection, processing, and storage. So we want to open the floor up to the group. The chat is on. And then also, if you'd like to say anything, we would really love to hear from you. So just feel free to raise your hand, which is down at the very bottom. There's a tab called reactions. And I think if you open that, you have a little spot to raise your hand. And so we would love to just hear from you all. And if you're shy, we'll call on you if we know you.
I'll make a couple of comments.
Great.
This is Dean Swift.
And Dean, sorry, I'm so sorry. Could you all introduce yourself, where you're from and what your role or your organization is?
Okay, I'm Dean Swift Seed Company, and I've supplied conifer seeds from the Southwest for 50 years now. And what I want to say is that I don't think you need to reinvent the wheel on a lot of these things. The knowledge about cone collection, processing, and seed storage is already there. There's no need to research that again, because it's all clear and it's easy, actually, fairly straightforward stuff. So that's one comment. Also, the traditional way of gathering cones is from squirrel. It's the red squirrel is the species that berries cones for its winter food supply. And it's far and away the most efficient way to gather cones. And it also gives the best quality seed cones because the squirrels cut cones when they're mature. And I've seen in the forest, I've seen the squirrels cut the cones off of one tree and store them for winter and wait a week to cut the cones off of the tree beside it. So the squirrels are, frankly, they're infallible. If the squirrels cut a cone, it's good. So that's another point. Thank you. If you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you, Dean. Appreciate you. So I see a great comment in the meeting chat from Josh Stoltz about, you know, that if indeed 12.5 million seedlings worth of seed exist, where it is, and how do we as growers get our hands on those supplies? I think that's a great question, Josh. Thank you. And if anybody has an answer, love to hear it. And I'll just add that talking to a lot of folks who are doing reforestation here in Colorado following the 2020 Colorado wildfires, it essentially is looking like there's not much ponderosa pine seed in particular to go around right now. So I wonder if maybe that's a little bit of what Josh is saying. So
I also wondered about that when Austin gave his initial presentation, because I'm certainly not aware that there's any ponderosa pine seed available, and he talked about almost another year's supply being somewhere. So I'm curious.
Yeah, sounds like I have some stuff to answer for here. So I did reach out to the to Bessie and the Colorado State Forest Service. And again, I'll emphasize that maybe that comparison wasn't that great because of seed transfer. Maybe it's all on the Arapahoe Roosevelt, and you know, so comparing it one-to-one is difficult. But that seed is in mostly the federal seed bank. And again, I hope I'm not angering anyone by saying that. Is that has anyone heard anything different than that, or
federal seed? What's the federal?
Bessie out in Nebraska, the very first federal nursery. We're lucky to still have it, and that's the one that serves Region 2 in Forest Service speak. So it covers Wyoming, Colorado.
Yeah, I know Region 2.
Yeah.
And Lucky Peak Nursery in Boise, Idaho is the seed bank for the Southwest region, Arizona and New Mexico.
Yeah.
Looks like we've got hands from Josh and Caitlin.
Yeah. So Josh, why don't you go ahead and tell us your thoughts?
Thank you, Maren. My name is Josh Stolz. I'm the nursery manager at One Canopy in Loveland, Colorado. So Austin, follow up to my question then. My understanding is that some of the federal nurseries are already at capacity. So again, it begs the question, how do private growers or even state level growers access that seed? My understanding is that that's proprietary for the USFS. If I'm incorrect, please let me know.
I think Jim could probably speak best to that. So maybe Jim Utes, would you mind sharing how that system works?
Yeah, well, in terms of the Forest Service, you know, we collect according to our seed zones and have it processed and stored in our seed bank, and those are for use on national forest lands. In terms of private growers accessing it, there's really not a provision for that unless they are contracting to grow trees for the Forest Service for grow on national forest lands. However, there are seed collection permits that are available to private collectors, and Dean Swift is one of those that has had these permits for many years and collects on national forest lands.
Thank you, Matthew, a guy. Thanks for joining us, Matthew.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I think, I guess I just want to chime in here saying that Silvaseed, company I work with, has been much like Dean. In fact, in many cases with some of the people on this call, collaborated to get some of those Forest Service permits and collect on federal land. Unfortunately, I would say in 90% of the cases over the last 3 decades, the records show, and even in our last 2 years of ramping up, that the majority of those permits that are available to us are $5 individual collector permits at most of the district ranger stations. In order to serve the private land base from the phenomenal genetic resource that is public lands, we would need some means to get around some of the bureaucratic barriers that would allow us for commercial scale access. All of the numbers that we are proposing, the volume of seed truly needed, are incongruent with the type of permitting and access that is available to the private collectors that are more nimble, in some cases much more experienced and ready to be collecting now and when those mass events happen. So this is an opportunity for a public-private partnership that starts with a conversation about barriers and maybe provide some advising to the policymakers that wrote some of those dated policies and can help us work around NEPA or other restrictions that would enable commercial access.
Thank you, Matthew. Chris, I see your hand is up. Oh, you are on mute, Chris.
Thank you, Marion. My name is Chris Karatzis. I'm also in the seed business. As the last 2 gentlemen spoke, I have Better Forest tree seeds. And I've been doing it for a while myself, probably 30 plus years. And I find something that would be very helpful from the top, the governmental level. We try to get on the same page. I mean, I collect forests from the Northwest to the Southwest to the East Coast. Every single National Forest Office has a different program. You can walk in one and ask for a cone collecting permit, and they look at you like you're from Mars. Then you go to another one and they want $5 a bushel and you can only apply online. And then you go to another one and they want $3 a bushel, but you had to call 2 weeks ago when the person writing timber and cone collecting permits was in the office. And then you go to a fourth and they hand it to you right over the counter for $2. So to me, if they would all get on the same page and we would know when and how or what's expected of the collector, that would be a big time bonus. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. So
Yeah,
do you see, go ahead.
This is Dean Swift again. And what Chris says is absolutely right. And it's simply the biggest frustration that we have as private suppliers of tree seeds is dealing with the Forest Service. And in fact, every district has its own procedures. And I understand that the Forest Service likes, to have local input, have things delegated to the local district. There are some good reasons for that. But in this case, it really gums up the works of trying to get cone permits in dozens of district Forest Service offices. I've had some tell me, oh, just go ahead and have fun. And then I've had others that say, no, not at all, and everything in between. So I endorse what Chris said. It is a big frustration. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. So there's some great comments in the chat that I'd like to chat about, but in the meantime, I would love to hear from some folks who on the call have actually never done seed collection, but who are looking to do seed collection and some of what your concerns are. I think we've heard some, from very, very seasoned folks who have a lot of experience, but I think that there's a lot of folks on the call also who know that they're going to need to do seed collection in the future and maybe have not yet done it and or don't have a lot of experience. We'd love to hear some of your thoughts on what your biggest concerns or barriers are as well. And in the meantime, while I'm letting some folks marinate on that, Matthew, I appreciate your comments in the chat about that a federal seed bank should be shared with the public. I agree. I think that's a really important thing that would be a really great resource for lots of different reasons. You know, cooperative needs, some resources in policy, some science and adaptation related work. That would be a really wonderful resource. And then Sarah Pearson, nice to have you here. I really also appreciate that you're sort of stating that a lot of the seed that some of the nurseries have stored, and if anyone is from nurseries, I would really love to hear from you about whether or not this perception is correct, that a lot of that seed is older seed. And I think we have some questions coming up about whether or not that seed is really the right seed to be planting, given that it is so old. It's maybe losing some viability, and then some questions about whether or not that seed is really the best seed to be adapted to a future climate. So
let me answer that. This is Dean Swift again, sorry. But the critical question about seed quality is easily answered with a laboratory test to test the germination. And depending on the genus, some conifer seeds will keep for many years. I've kept some for, well, I think the longest seed lot I had was 28 years. And it still had a laboratory germination of 94%. And that's on the pine species. Now, firs do not keep as well, but Douglas fir and pines keep especially well. And spruce is also quite good. You can keep them for 10 or 20 years with no loss of germination. But it has to be from a high quality crop, has to be processed well, properly, and stored properly. So as long as you do it right, there's no problem with older seed. Thanks.
thanks, Dean. Okay, I'd love to hear from some folks who have not done seed collection yet and what some of your considerations are, and it can be around any of these themes.
I can go ahead and
Yeah.
jump in if that's okay. This
Sure.
is Caitlin with One Canopy, the same company that Josh spoke about earlier. For context, we have a greenhouse property in Loveland, Colorado that's producing this year this is our inaugural year, and we have about 300,000 seedling trees right now. I think one of the biggest constraints for us as we move into seed is just the technical component of, I know that the U.S. Forest Service has pretty well-developed guidelines for collecting seed, particularly as it pertains to U.S. Forest Service land. But just having access to that information so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, or even just their training programs, would be hugely helpful. I know there's folks like Silvaseed who have been doing this for quite a long time. And I think we can, as a private company, can pull from that as well. But I think Matthew said it best, like a public-private partnership that allows for flow of seed and information and technical expertise would be hugely helpful for us.
Thank you, Caitlin. Okay, and Cody, I see your hand up.
Hi, thanks, Maren. Just in response to, as new people to the seed collection game are curious and learning, I'm with the Forest Stewards Guild based out of Santa Fe, and we host and run multiple youth crews throughout the summer and fall seasons with Forest Service and Jemez Pueblo, and we hire from directly within those communities and neighboring communities. And so I think one thing that is identified as a potential challenge from our standpoint is just understanding what certifications and training needs there are for those youth hires. So we hire folks 18 to 25. For many of them, it's their introduction to natural resource and forest management. And so they get a broad range of engagement on a variety of projects, from tree planting to prescribed fire and pile burning and some thinning. And so we try to give them a broad range of introduction to all it takes, or all the forest management that is conducted within the Southwest. And so thinking about what are some of the training barriers to having those folks participate in seed collection. And then I guess the second piece of that is understanding what part of that seed collection and management process would be most valuable to have some kind of conservation corps support in. Is it in that seed collection, or is there more valuable, kind of more need in other parts of the process?
Awesome. Fabulous. Thank you,
Can
Cody.
I pick on Josh Sloan to answer that, since I know that, yeah, I'm just gonna pick on Josh.
Fair enough. So, it kind of depends. We have a number of training programs that we're working on starting up, and Cody, I don't believe we've met, but I've spoken with Xander and Eton a bit about this. So definitely going to have to touch base with you, and we can figure some stuff out. But kind of the short answer is that in terms of workforce development, in terms of skills and expertise that we need in the workforce, it's across the board. And so for a lot of the communities and students that are coming into programs like your youth corps, we can do climber training relatively quickly. Forest Service does climber training in 3 days, going from somebody basically, just no experience whatsoever climbing to being either a certified climber trainee or a certified climber. Forest Service is a 3-day training. Private sector, I spent a number of years training climbers under International Society of Arboriculture standards. So private sector, that's a little more involved. But so there's almost like an apprenticeship aspect to it when you're talking about training climbers like that. There's like an initial certification, which is just making sure people understand safety protocols, gear, et cetera. But then making sure that they have the supervision over time to do that. And so then that's getting us kind of into sort of that mid-level of expertise that we also need to train folks up in. The folks that would understand the biology for the scouting as well as the climbing safety and could oversee other climbers. Right now, Jim, I don't know if it was verbally or in the chat, mentioned that the Forest Service is focusing on training up climbers internally. And so we've worked with them on that. They have, I think now, 2 or 3 trained climbers per forest, but we definitely still need to ramp that up a lot. And so we've got, in terms of training expertise, and that's just specifically on the climbing, which would relate to the scouting and collection that youth crews like yours might be involved in. But then we have everything from that up to the 4-year degrees, and graduate degrees. So that's where we get into the BS forestry, and that gets a lot of the management context in there. And then on through master's PhD level, like would be, working with our program or Owens at a university, developing that basic research to help us answer a lot of the fundamental questions. But I guess to kind of wrap that up is we're really just in the beginning stage of building what those curricula look like. And we're just in the early stages of figuring out what that training and certification program is going to look like for the Southwest. So we have an internal model for the Forest Service. We have some academic models at universities that some of us have worked with elsewhere. And I think part of what we're hoping to pull out of, gatherings like this is to help some of us start to figure out how to build those training and certification programs here to meet that workforce need. So yeah, any advice, guidance in that direction would be appreciated, because we're soaking that all up right now and trying to put something together in the next year or so.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it. I know Eitan and Xander had mentioned working with you, so just want to throw it out there for the group and appreciate the overview.
Scott, nice to see you.
Hey, nice to see you too. Hey everybody, Scott Godwin, nursery manager here at the Colorado State Forest Service Nursery in Fort Collins. Just kind of a thing that I've been chewing on. Given the scale and intensity of forest fires in the region, oftentimes species that would typically regenerate on their own or maybe completely destroyed, as well as sort of latent seed crops on the ground, that sort of thing. So we're losing potentially entire stands of genetics in the field. So in the interest of preserving those genetics from being lost altogether, the question is, what is the potential of seed orchards? How would that potentially play into providing a more steady seed supply? I realize there's a lot of species involved in this project, but what's the potential of helping with the seed supply as well as preserving some of these genetics that can potentially be lost in the field?
Oh, and it looks like you might have an answer to that.
Yeah, I was about to say I'd like to return the favor and nominate Owen for that one.
I thought I froze for a second. So Scott, yes, that is definitely high up on the radar. And in fact, what we've done with some of our old provenance and progeny tests, and this is common, we do convert those into seed orchards. So we do have 2 seed orchards actually at the research center in Mora, but that's a drop in the bucket for what we really need, and they're only for ponderosa pines. So, going forward, when we are looking at potentially putting together these common garden and provenance trials, we could build this in parallel to doing something like that, because in the process of creating these seed orchards, we actually need to know how these different ecotypes are actually working. So because we just don't know their performance, and we need to be doing the testing. So we can't just create seed orchards without knowing how they perform, and that actually comes along in time. So in a way, we can do forward selections and backward selections along this whole process, but it's a long game, and that's the hard part about this. We can get these things going, and it is something we want to do, and but it is going to take a whole village to do that, right? So we're all going to have to contribute to do this. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up, and I think most folks here agree. Like, if we can get woods run seed, and we're going to always need to do that. That's great, but we should also be able to have these seed orchards available as well. So the 2 combined are really the direction we need to go in the future. Looks like Jim's got his hand up.
Yeah, Jim.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention relative to seed orchards, there's kind of a middle ground between collecting woods run seed and establishing seed orchards that is actually takes quite a bit less intensive maintenance. And that's one that we've been kicking around in the Southwest region, and that is to establish seed collection areas of plus trees. In other words, trees that have good phenotypes, and that these collection areas be distributed to encompass all the seed zones and elevation bands. And then we can go into those native stands and rogue them, thin them, and do all kinds of culturing type things to at least improve the potential for seed production in those stands, but not have to formally maintain them like you would a seed orchard. And so I'm not saying seed orchards are not a good thing, and they are, but I'm just pointing out that there's also a cheaper version that is a little bit one step above Woods Run seed collections.
Thanks, James. I think I always appreciate when we can build in a more valuable way of doing things and or build in some sort of monitoring that's you know, kind of low tech. I think there's a lot to learn there without spending a lot of money. So that's a great idea. I want to call out a comment that someone from the Coalition for the Peter River Watershed here in Colorado mentioned, was that we're at a risk of over professionalizing and that we should make use of unskilled labor and interested in volunteers and community members. And I think that this was sort of one of the themes that I have been hearing, particularly around skills and vocational training, is, you know, how to include unskilled or underskilled labor into this. And I think there's a lot of really interesting and exciting ways to do that. So I'd love to hear from CPRW folks or anybody else on the call who might have some additional comments on that. And then we'll circle back to some of the folks who raised their hand in the chat.
Hey, Maren, can you hear me here?
Yeah.
Hey, this is Corey with CPRW here in Fort Collins. And yeah, I just want to give some background. So last year was kind of like our first major push for cone collection. And I mean, we talked with folks like you and other folks with TNC here in the area prior to our collection. And yeah, we utilized, you know, unskilled volunteers and community members to collect. And it wasn't that they were, you know, unskilled the day of. It was, you know, training was involved and we talked them through it. And it was just a great way to get labor for way cheaper than contractors. And this isn't large scale by any means. This wasn't like we were going to be collecting for the next 10 years. This was just our initial pilot collection, see how it goes. But just the way it worked and the interest that we had, it just made us realize that there is a lot of labor out there. And you are right that education is still important for this labor force. But if we are able to train them day of, day before, give them information, there are a lot of folks that are willing to do work for the enjoyment of it and just for just because it's in their backyard and for the love of it.
Thanks, Corey. So I guess, Corey, I want to dive a little bit more into that. Given that you all, you know, largely utilize volunteers, like what kind of trainings would be helpful in your eyes?
For us, I mean, I think workshops like this, and then as I can't remember who said, but I think, you know, just as U.S. Forest Service has protocols on collection, but sending those out or sending those workshops out and just getting them into our eyes so we have a better understanding of exactly what we're doing and we're not trying to dig through the literature to try and understand what to do and reach out to folks to like get knowledge, but just have those resources available so we know exactly what we're doing. We're on the same page with U.S. Forest Service or other contractors. And then that way we can bring that information to our volunteers and community members. And that way we're just all on the same page.
Awesome. Thank you, Corey. Appreciate it. And then Cameron from Wildland Restoration Volunteer, I saw your comment. Maybe this is a follow-up to Corey's comments, but I'm assuming that this might be some trainings that would be helpful for you all, which would be scouting for cone collection locations and when and how to collect. So that's great. If I've misinterpreted you, please clarify, but.
No, I think you got the gist of it. As far as like scouting, I think our staff has the expertise to do so, but I think just educating the general public and private landowners to know what to look for when it comes to scouting these locations for cone collections. That way, when they are ripe and ready for harvest, or when they're almost ready, they can reach out to us or reach out to whoever has the capacity to collect these cones. They can give us a heads up as opposed to us being the only ones going out and looking for these locations.
Awesome. Thank you. And Rachel, I saw that you added something, and perhaps this is a follow-up to what we're talking about right now. in the chat, which is some kind of, tutorial that identifies Southwest seed identification, scouting, collection curriculum that's mostly standardized across the region. I'm wondering if you would say more.
Yeah, hi, Rachel Clow here, Reforestation Coordinator for New Mexico. And this is just a place that my mind has been as we think about kind of spinning up some workshops here in New Mexico. And I've been trying to get some curriculum. I know the Forest Service has some, but just thinking about how we can make this sort of a standardized approach across the region and have like a series of workshops and what that looks like. It's not going to be perfect right away, but it'd be great to make it replicable across our region.
Awesome. Thanks, Rachel. And then Sarah and Irene just left some really cool comments as well. Sarah is sort of, suggesting that volunteers and the logistics around seed collection can be really difficult just because sometimes you don't know that you're actually going to collect seed until just days before, and that can be a barrier to incorporating volunteers. And then Irene, I loved what you had to say about how you've been reaching out to youth in your high school. And if either one of you have any more to comment on that, I'd love to hear more. But and then James, did you still have a comment from previous? See your hand raised, and would love to hear from you if you still had something that you wanted to offer.
No, I just forgot to lower it.
No worries, that's great. So we've got about 10 more minutes for this large group discussion, and some of the themes that we haven't really gotten to quite as in depth is some of the business and economics or the cooperative or collaborative needs. And I would just love to hear from those folks who did add some post-its to that. Did we capture what you had to say? What are your feelings around this? Because I think that's another really big piece. There's lots of questions around the science and adaptation and the resources and policy, but really when we start to get into, the nuts and bolts of seed collection, I think that those two pieces are a big challenge. So if anyone has any comments, I'd love to hear some of that in the next 10 minutes while we got time.
I'm not sure. This is Dean Swift again. I'm not sure if this is the place for this question, but for Jim and Owen, etc., in the discussion about seed zones, are you planning for a different climate 20 or 50 years from now? In other words, one seed zone may need to move north by a seed zone or two if the climate keeps changing as it has. So in effect, it would be necessary to anticipate the climate possibly several decades in the future in the seed zones that are used to replant. Thanks.
Yeah, Dean, I can address that. I mean, we're really planning for a 2100 climate, right? So the idea is that the work that we're doing now is adaptive management, right? So as we learn more and more from our testing, and hopefully we can get more and more provenance and progeny tests and common garden studies put in that help guide us along the way to understand how we can move those seed sources around. Because it depends on the species, it depends on the genotypes. So there's a lot of factors that come into play. We can't just make a blanket statement that this source can be moved, 100 kilometers away. We have to be very scientific in this approach. And we're getting some, good data now, but I think it's one of those things that we'll be working in parallel with making this happen, as well as continuing the research to aid in that effort. So does that answer your question in part? I mean, the fact that we are looking at this and that this is a part of our plan, and I know that Jim's got his hand up because one of the things that they're going to be doing is hiring a geneticist for the region And maybe that's what he's going to say. So, and I guarantee you that that person will be a part of that conversation.
James, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to respond, and I'm going to respond from kind of a Forest Service policy perspective. In terms of policy, we are required to establish seed zones for reforestation purposes. The regional geneticist can alter that. They can approve anything in terms of adaptive studies and things of that nature. At this point, though, the advice that we've been getting is to try to move, even though the seed zones are pretty broad, and so we can change elevations and degrees of latitude, and we can do that within our current policy. But we do have to take direction from the regional geneticist. And in the Southwest region, we are hiring a geneticist. We're going to be outreaching that pretty quickly and trying to get that on board sometime this year. And that geneticist will actually, until the Rocky Mountain region gets their own geneticist, that geneticist will be also serving the Rocky Mountain region and Intermountain region. And so, we have a lot to learn related to assisted migration. And, our Forest Service research can do lots and lots of stuff under the name of research, but operationally on national forest, we're limited to using the existing seed zones or getting special approval from the geneticist.
Thanks, James. So we've got about 5 minutes left, and I'd still love to dive in a little bit more into any thoughts that you all have, but specifically around some of the cooperative needs, collaborative needs, business or economic challenges, it kind of within any organization. Matthew, thanks.
Hey, I guess this is more of just my own personal musings and kind of how we've been trying to develop a philosophy on the private side, as a amalgamation of various companies working together. There's a lot of excitement, and there's some of us who are going to be working in this sector regardless of whether or not, the current buzz is sustained. So I think something that we're kind of building into a mantra, if you will, is to think about this beyond the boom bust cycles that come with federal funding and looking at opportunities to incentivize a long-term outlook. We talk about, wages, we talk about incentivizing people to come and do this work. And on the other side, there's a lot of discussion about volunteers helping. There's an old adage for a lot of us who've been working in tree planting and regeneration for a while that isn't really fair, but is applicable, which is volunteers kill trees. And part of it is because they're not committed to the outcomes necessarily, and they're not practiced. That doesn't mean we should be gatekeeping in any way. I guess all of this to make the point that I think if this is going to be sustained beyond the, Replan X funding cycles and really be mirroring the duration or the longevity of forests, then I think we need to figure out a way to tie this into incentives that are market driven. And I'm not just saying this being on the private side, I really genuinely believe this. And I linked an article from 1967 in the chat. And if you read that, you'll find that the authors who came with an outside perspective from England and looked at seed collection in the Northwest really shared this perspective of lack of accountability and lack of incentives, but really a formidable seed collection operation that was taking place from squirrel cache and grassroots all the way to the timber companies, right? But why did things fizzle over the decades to come? And a lot of that is because the timber faceted market-driven approach there really waned with the Northwest Forest Plan and among other industries, contracting. So I'm really thinking about this in a long-term perspective, and I'd love for others to be, proposing ways we can get creative here moving forward.
Thank you, Matthew. Great. Okay, we've got just a couple more minutes. Are there any final thoughts before we take a quick break and then come back to dive in a little bit more into our breakout groups? Okay, I think I've given it a long enough awkward silence unless anyone has a final thing they'd love to say. Why don't we go ahead and meet back at 3:05 and we will talk really quickly about what we'll do in our breakout groups. Thank you all so much for all the wonderful comments and questions and shared links and things of that nature in the chat, and then also the wonderful comments and questions that came up in the verbal part of the conversation. So thank you, and we'll see you back at 3:05. Okay, so hope everyone had a good short little break. We are going to dive into our breakout groups now. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to break into 6 different groups. You've sort of been randomly assigned to a group. Some of that was gleaned from some of the questions that you were asking or that you illustrated an interest in the original response for the RSVP for the workshop. So I think what we'll do right now is Brooke is going to put us all into our breakout groups. And then really what we're doing is diving into one of those themed areas in each one of the breakout groups. And so I would suggest that as much as possible, you turn your screens on, have a quick introduction with all the other people in your breakout groups. And the chat, from our understanding, is one that everyone can see. So when you are chatting in the breakout groups, it's not only for the folks in your breakout group, just so you know. So we will go ahead and dive into our breakout groups and come back in about 20, 25, 30 minutes. And the biggest thing we're going to be trying to do is within each one of those theme areas is really identify the highest priorities of things that we could that could be addressed in the next 1 to 3 years or so. So we will come back in about 30 minutes and we'll have a little report out. Then we'll have one more short section on really trying to understand what existing resources we may have to address some of the things that we've been talking about today. And we'll close up by 4:30 for everyone. So Brooke, can you assign us all to our breakout groups? If you get kicked out, just stay where you are and Brooke will be able to put you in your group.
Yeah, I was looking for you. So we lost about a third of our participants during that last break, and most of them happened to be in group 6. So I
Okay,
assigned you to a different group. I don't know if that makes sense.
okay.
Yeah.
So that might be where I just came from, because I was in there with Catherine and we didn't
Yeah.
know what was going on. Okay.
Yeah, so all the folks on the screen right here are maybe away from their computers. They are assigned to rooms, but they're not actively in those yet. So it's potential we could make this a group, but otherwise I would just suggest if you want to hop into that same group with Catherine again, you're welcome to.
Okay. I'm down for whatever.
Okay.
So I can,
Or we can
I
hang
can-
out here.
whatever I can get back with them.
Yeah.
We'll see ya.
All right. Hi, Alex, welcome. We are all in breakout groups right now. So if you'd like, I can put you in a breakout group and you can join that conversation. Or if you want to hang out here, that breakout group will be coming back. Let's see, at 3:40. So kind of a long time to hang out.
Yeah, I lost internet connection there for a while and just came back on. So
Okay.
what groups there are or anything like that at this point?
Yeah, so it's each facilitator is leading a group discussion kind of based on the different groups that we had from the whiteboard. So we've got like the policy, logistics, collaboration, business. So it's random right now, and honestly, I think the groups are probably going to touch a little bit on everything. So I can put you in any of them.
The business commercial would be, I think, probably useful.
Okay, sure thing. Yep, let me put you over there. Okay. Where did your name go? Okay, there you go. You should see that now. Hi, Kevin. Thanks for joining us. We are in breakout rooms right now. So if you'd like to participate in a breakout group, I can get you assigned. If not, you can hang out here and the groups will return back to this main room at 3:40 p.m. So in about 20 minutes.
Okay, I just had to leave. I was in the meeting before. I just had to leave to take care of some other stuff. So I'll just wait here.
Okay, sure. No problem.
Hi, Brooke.
Hey, Alex.
Hey, I think I ended up in the wrong breakout room, or it was a breakout room that didn't seem to be applied to me.
Oh, okay. Okay, I think we had you in 5. We can put you in another one. I'm getting the sense that they might not be sticking to what they were maybe originally planning to talk about. So maybe I can try another room, and if it doesn't seem to fit either, come back here and we can try another one. How's that sound?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Hey, everyone. I hope everyone's breakout group was as good as mine. That was awesome. Honestly, a little too short, but that's okay. So I think what we'll do now is we'll just do a really brief report out from the facilitators about some of the kind of big things that you all talked about, and then maybe some of the identified priorities, if you got there, of what might be done based on those 6 themes that we've been sort of surrounding our conversation around the whole day. So why don't we start with Owen with science and adaptation.
Thanks, Maren. Yeah, I'm going to try to look at my notes and get myself organized at the same time as I'm communicating this to everybody. So see how that goes. So basically, and this may have been true with the other breakout sessions, we had a few questions to stimulate the conversation. And I think that, we've got some key takeaway messages, but I'm just going to talk about the questions that we were able to address in the time that we had. And the first question was, do we have enough information to do seed collection in a changing climate? And I think the answer we all came up with is yes. We can start and should our collection now with what we've been doing in terms of superior tree and woods runs, but expand that into a range of different ecotypes. So looking for the best trees on those fringe sites, right? So the idea is that our expansion of that genetic diversity increases, and that we don't necessarily need to be deploying these right away on the landscape in an assisted migration outside of their normal range. We can be doing testing with these seeds first, right? So there's a lot of opportunity for us to get the seed and make decisions, because as Dean alluded to in his discussions about seed storage, a lot of the conifer species that we have will store for a long time. So we can start making decisions on how we can use those seeds in both research and deployment after we've collected them. But we can't do anything if they haven't been collected. So in terms of research, it goes back to the end of the day, we need to be collecting and expanding where our collections occur. Another important one is, do we have the right tools to support our work that we're doing in terms of research and management at the right scales? And I think the answer we all came up with, and if my group wants to challenge my responses here, is that no, we really don't. For example, when we talk about common garden studies and provenance tests, we just have a few. And the ideal scenario is these tests need to be deployed along a gradient within that range of species for a huge range of species. And we don't have that. And it's something that we need to be doing. And I think that's probably one of the more important tools that we need to be working on right now is getting a lot of common garden studies in place. In terms of future research, actually I missed one. In terms of current research, there's not a lot going on. So I know Paul and Anna, they've got some things that are going on with limber pine and bristlecone, and we've got stuff with southwestern white pine. But from the Forest Service perspective, regionally, there's not a lot going on in terms of that seed and genetic piece. That hopefully will change with the hiring of a geneticist for the region and the work that we're all trying to do going forward. So what do we need to be doing in the future? So that was our next point, and that is we should be looking at kind of some landscape level work. So for example, there are folks already doing landscape level monitoring, and in one of the sticky notes that came out of our thing, it was about prediction and modeling of cone production. So if we have folks that are going out in the field and monitoring something in the field, this could be an additional data point that they could be gathering to help us build some of the important tools for these predictions and models used for cone. It's still a very gray area in the sense of there's a lot of variables that go into that. But at the end of the day, I think that, if there's folks already in the field and there's some data points that could be collected, there's an opportunity there. And I think one of the things I want to go back to that we've talked about over and over again, and we just kept circling back to, the importance of setting up these common garden studies. So with our priorities that we have right now, our number one priority is that we need to be putting in across our landscape a lot of common garden provenance tests. And that's going to take time, and that's going to take a lot of resources. But I think from that information, we will be able to make some really important decisions on how we deploy seed sources into different locations. And so the geneticists that we'll be working with in the future will help us understand what direction we need to be going with certain seed sources. And another really important thing that was brought up is that in terms of research and management, it's about communication. So, we need to, what we're doing right now is just that. This is an opportunity for us to communicate a lot of different things, but maybe we have more specific topics that we talk about. So it could be just the common garden theme, and we bring in the right folks to have these conversations about that, or it's about assisted migration. And once we have an understanding from the research side, how we can convey that information to the public, because at the end of the day, we're going to need to get their buy-in on a lot of the things that we're trying to do, because we may have the science in place, but we know how the public sometimes reacts, and some may or may not believe in science. So there's some convincing that may need to happen for us to actually do the things that we need to do. I think that I covered everything, and I'll pass it back over to Maren.
Awesome. Thanks, Owen. And thanks to everyone in the science and adaptation group. That sounds like a really cool conversation. I'm going to pass it to Catherine with the breakout group that was focusing on logistical issues.
Yeah, we had a great conversation, and we could probably make a 10-page list of all of the challenges that were logistics. So I'm going to try to just sort of form up a couple big ideas that came out of our conversations, looking at sort of the challenges and the opportunities. So some of the big challenges at every level I heard were aging infrastructure. We don't have the infrastructure to do what we need. It hasn't been maintained over time, either in the private or the federal sector. A second challenge was about the workforce. We heard a bunch of different things, but one was that we have these trade-offs during large production years where we have a very limited workforce. We have to select where to collect cones from. We can't cover the areas we would like to. And that sort of circled on training and building internal capacity and external contracting capacity. The third thing that I heard was we have some interesting links along our supply chain that need to be strengthened. So in terms of logistics, we are having to send our seeds out for cleaning and storage very far away. It is both a time human, do humans have to drive them to these places? How do we get them there? Do we have enough of those nodes close to us that can serve us? And lastly, sort of to bridge over to the opportunities, there is a ton of interest in this, but people really feel they need more support to know sort of where and how to do things. So I wanted to switch to the opportunities. I asked my group if you could remove all the barriers, what would you remove and how would you move forward? And one opportunity we heard about was raising awareness. We heard about the Nevada Native Seeds Partnership and some of the things that are working really well in Nevada because people are aware both of the challenges and of the opportunities to collaborate for collection and storage. We definitely heard about a need for better collaboration. We heard both, we don't have enough people doing this and we would like to be helping you, but we don't know how. So there is an awesome opportunity for collaboration between federal and non-federal partners. And lastly, something I really liked that I heard was how we might be doing this work all at very nested scales, from the local watershed to the national forest to the interior West. And so just this incredible opportunity to recognize the diversity of actors who are sort of nested in working together. So with that, I will turn it back to you, Marion.
Amazing. I love it. Oh my gosh, this is very cool. Very exciting to get some of these insights from you all. And again, just can't express my appreciation enough. So I'm going to pass it now to Libby, whose group was focusing on collaborative and cooperative needs.
Thanks for setting that up so nicely, Catherine. I appreciate it. So we had a nice little conversation about collaboration and cooperative needs. And, you know, just started off with the question of whether or not collaboration is necessary. And I think the resounding answer to that was yes. It was also interesting to me, and something that I very much appreciate about hearing everyone's different perspectives is that my brain is stuck in this idea of cross-jurisdictional collaboration. And I think a lot of the conversations that we had really focused on, you know, how do we collaborate just to support and bolster the pipeline of collection? So how do we support collaboration so that we can help staff understaffed groups? It's a little complicated sentence there, but you get where I'm going. How do we support training and getting other groups or agencies started in that cone collection process? So are there collaborative opportunities for trainings, for getting folks out onto different agency land to see how the process works so that they can establish their own cone collection processes? And really just the need for additional communication, right? So there are lots of synergies that do exist, and just making sure that those mechanisms are set in place so that those conversations are happening to find those synergies and figure out where the needs and the gaps are and how they align is another awesome space where I think, you know, we have big needs there. In terms of priorities, we basically, I think, settled on the fact that the initial priority for establishing additional collaboration is really just making sure that we are getting everybody on board and that we're setting up those communication channels, because they don't necessarily exist in those spaces in a way that is intended to find those opportunities. And then we touched a little bit on seed co-ops and opportunities for that. It sounds like it's a potential challenge, but there may be opportunities there. And I think that that is something that should be set up for future conversation as we move forward. So I'll stop there.
Awesome. Thanks, Libby. Okay, I'm going to pass it to Austin, whose group discussed business and economics.
Yes, so luckily enough, we had several actual seed collectors in our group, which they admitted how rare that is to have 3 of them in one place. So we had a lot of overlap with everything the previous groups have said. We talked a lot about the labor force, the labor shortage, which is an economic issue. We talked a lot about seed ownership, which we touched on as the whole group earlier, and sort of who controls access to the seed and the financial flows there. Some interesting insights. Private seed collectors mostly work with private companies at the moment. It can be, they said it's somewhat difficult to meet all the requirements to collect on federal land. Some more interesting insights. It's actually very difficult to become a seed collector nowadays because it's so equipment intensive. Dean and Chris have amassed their equipment over and used it over decades, but for someone just looking to get into it, that's a pretty intense capital investment up front. So I don't know if we need loans or such. I don't know, but that's the first time I've heard of that. Caitlin had a good point about sort of a scarcity versus abundance mindset. We are being very careful with seed at the moment, and maybe we need to switch that. Long-term agreements are useful. So rather than reinventing the wheel every year, a 5-year IDIQ, 5-year agreement, like it sounds like they're exploring in New Mexico, that provides some of the certainty over time that we really need. So think at least 5 years and think larger geographies so that we can spread out collection opportunities across species, across different landscapes, so we capture more of these. And we need more to boost the demand signal, really. I've seen some nurseries having, at the beginning of the year, they put out exactly what seed they want, how much they're willing to pay for it and such. So maybe we can move in that direction, because the places that do have that, and it sounds like you need to have a really well-functioning nursery to do that, they do get a lot of seed coming in the door. So maybe that's a direction to move in. But yeah, so we had a lot of good comments, and it's going to take me a while to condense them, and because there were some good ideas there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Austin. So I'll go next. My group focused on skills and vocational training, and we had some really interesting responses to this question of, do we even have the human capacity to do this work? And so it seemed like there was a really large spectrum of whether or not folks felt like we actually did have the capacity to do this work. Some saying, yes, we do. It's really just trying to find the right people and the right opportunities and find that fit. And that's really the barrier. Whereas other people were suggesting that, no, we don't have the capacity at all. And particularly because of some of the new IIJA bills that are coming down, that's the major focus. And so it was a pretty interesting kind of swing between those two, with a lot of gray area in between. And there was some really cool insights about incorporating, high school youth or other volunteers, and how that actually, particularly for Casey, and Casey, I'm forgetting where you are from exactly. I'm so sorry, I should have written that down. But how it was really, not only incorporating youth, but also bringing a lot of values and community together. So that was really cool. Then when we were talking about gaps in the training, that was another really interesting place that I think we sort of collectively did feel that there are some major training gaps needed. And this is at, different organizations and agency levels. But one of the things that was repeated by some folks from the U.S. Forest Service is that, a lot of the basis of capacity right now is recent graduates. And we've heard this before today, but that, a lot of the folks who did know how to do seed collection have retired. And so a lot of people are kind of like doing this work for the first time and don't have the time or capacity to really put towards really learning this. And so some better training would be great, particularly that is hands-on. And that really gets to how to do this work in a really applied manner. And so things like, how you actually identify the crop, how you get the cones down, how you process them, how you get them to the nursery, that these are, things that just a lot of new folks are coming online, recent graduates from a lot of the land grant universities like my own, where we do not teach reforestation at all. And so people are coming in pretty new and green to this. We also heard about the need to think about trainings that really focus on what is viable seed, how do we collect that seed that's going to be really viable, how long can it be stored, how to utilize seed to adapt to a future climate, and also some thoughts on the appropriate site selection and site preparation. So for reforestation in particular, but also for the trees that we're picking. So lots of really great opportunities for additional trainings. And I will pass it now to Josh, who was focusing with his group on resources and policy.
Yeah, so actually, as a couple of folks here know, most of the policy group ditched during the break. And so we did not actually have a breakout meeting. I got shuffled into Catherine's logistics group.
Okay. So maybe a barrier is that folks who think about resources and policy are too busy to be thinking about this.
Yeah.
Josh, you weren't by yourself in the room and just trying to have those questions by yourself. You didn't do that.
Just talking to myself like most days.
Okay, great. Well, all right. Thank you. So I think what we'll do now is we're going to jump to our next group discussion, just for the next 20 minutes or so. And really what we want to do is allow an opportunity for all of us who are on the call to talk about what existing resources may be available to address some of the challenges that we've talked about today. And so we can go back to those 6 themes that we were talking about and share that whiteboard. And, you know, folks, feel free to put up a Post-it note if you've got a great link or a great idea. But I want to maybe, Brooke, if you'll start that whiteboard, I want to call on a couple of people to talk about a few different things that are happening in case people are not aware of it. So first, in Colorado, Scott Godwin, I'm wondering if you could talk really quickly about what's happening with the Colorado State Forest Service nursery. And then after that, Owen, Josh, or anybody else who's on the call, if you could quickly talk about what's going on with the Reforestation Center. And then we can, you know, start to talk about any other existing resources that are already available that people have been thinking about when we've been talking about these limitations and barriers this afternoon. So Scott, would you mind sharing kind of a quick update on what's happening with the Colorado State Forest Service nursery?
Sure, I could give you a kind of an overview of kind of where we're coming from, where we're at, and where we want to be. So if anybody has any particular questions about this, let me know. I'll try to answer them as I can, but I'm going to be pretty, I'm going to speak broadly at first. So our facility has faced all the typical challenges that public nurseries face in general, from staffing issues and funding issues, aging infrastructure, questionable markets, growing on speculation, these sorts of challenges that kind of led the program to struggle. And so over the past couple of years, with COVID really kind of taking a toll, this facility decided that it was time to really make a push to upgrade and improve the infrastructure, staffing, and processes of this nursery. And we were fortunate enough to get significant funding from the state as well as federal sources to make a meaningful impact toward that project. So our plans are to essentially to expand our greenhouse capacity to probably, you know, at least double our container production capacity. We're open to even scale it up from there as we're able to. We are focusing on restaffing the administration of the nursery, as well as restructuring how we approach labor. And then the final thing that we're trying to do is, as we are able to kind of start small and focus on our quality and delivery issues and regain customer confidence in our project, our product and our program, our intention is to pursue contract growing, whether that is with private industry players that have long-term or larger projects, or also with federal projects in the greater Intermountain West. We see that as the future that's going to be able to drive our program and ensure that we are able to sustain ourselves going forward. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions if anybody has any specifics. Otherwise, I can just leave it there.
That's great. Thank you so much, Scott. Really appreciate that. Josh, Owen, anyone else on the call want to talk about the New Mexico Reforestation Center and specifically how it's addressing needs around seed collection?
Sure, I can cover that, and Owen's welcome to jump in anywhere he wants to. So for folks that aren't familiar with the New Mexico Reforestation Center, we started building this, basically designing and developing the concept and programs around 2019. And so it's really just now getting up and running, funded, and we're looking at breaking ground this year on the physical facilities for the nursery expansion. But the concept was a lot of the barriers we've talked about here today with regard to seed. You know, we can talk about similar barriers when it comes to the nursery production, you know, getting the outplanting done. Every step in that reforestation pipeline has challenges, and they all have to be scaled proportionally, and connectivity has to be maintained. throughout that. And so we really started with the New Mexico Reforestation Center looking at that pipeline very holistically. And in New Mexico, that led us to pull together 4 specific partners to address the reforestation challenge. And so that's New Mexico State University, where Owen's John T. Harrington Forestry Research Center currently has all of the state's nursery capacity. UNM has the forest climate modeling. New Mexico New Mexico Highlands University, where I am, we have the forestry education and workforce development. And then MNERD, the state's forestry division, they have the Good Neighbor Authority Agreement and those particular relevant authority relationships with the federal agencies that would allow us to interoperate efficiently with the federal system and overcome a lot of these barriers that have come up with regard to federal seed bank access, collection, permitting, and all that. So kind of long story short there, the New Mexico Reforestation Center concept is sort of a one-stop shop entity where we're handling the, basically serving as a clearinghouse and workforce development and education center and operational center for all of the seed collection, all of the seedling production, and then coordination of the planting activities in the state. If we want to focus, and then of course in each of those, part of the reason we tied this in with the universities is for the education and workforce development and research components. So those are all key pieces that we need, again, to address these challenges holistically throughout the pipeline, seed to seedling. Specifically on the seed part, a lot of what we're working on to get over the access barriers that have come up that we're trying to work through to get access to federal seed resources in the seed bank at Lucky Peak, Coeur d'Alene, Bessie. There are a couple of avenues to that if you have, kind of the right connections and are working at the regional level or through the state under a GNA. But basically, we're right now working on a region-wide collection permit that would streamline access to any national forest in this case for Region 3. Conceptually, we'd probably have to work through other RO offices for adjacent regions if we were to expand that beyond here. But that's kind of the strategic approach we've developed for getting over that district level permitting or forest level permitting. And then similarly for the planting, we're trying to work with the regional office and the forest supervisors and under a GNA framework, under that authority framework, to bypass a lot of those inefficiencies that some of the folks brought up earlier, Dean and Chris, that they pointed out with the policy challenges of policy interpretation and implementation varying district to district. As a lot of us know, that results in huge inefficiencies. And so part of what we've tried to do strategically here is just to create effectively a single entity, a single point of contact that any other party could interact with and work through that could operate across any jurisdictional lines or ownerships. So that's pretty high level. Happy to cover questions on details.
That's awesome. Thank you, Josh.
Sure.
I want to open it up to anyone who has any resources that they know of, and I want to call on particularly some of the folks who have been doing seed collection for more than 3 to 5 years. Any resources that you can think of that fit into any of these themes or are overarching any of these themes. So I'm going to just have an awkward pause until someone says something, or I might call on you.
Yeah, well, I guess kind of a question I'd throw out there for folks is how many people here are familiar with Ringer in the Forest Service? All right, awesome. So Reforestation Nurseries and Genetic Resources. It's rngr.net. They have a fantastic collection of resources on their website. So for anyone that's just getting into reforestation, just getting into nursery work, seed collection, thank you, Maren. That is the single best repository I'm aware of on the planet for a lot of this information. You can get lost in there, but you will find what you want to know as far as technical details.
Okay, so I see some activity happening with Post-it notes. I'll just share that, you know, with some of the things that Owen was talking about with some of the science or adaptation. In Colorado, we are unfortunately do not have a common garden study, to my knowledge, at least. And if someone knows of it, I would love to hear about it. But myself and colleagues at CFRI and Colorado State University created a planting study this last year, really trying to understand the cold and drought tolerances of all of the native species that were burned in the 2020 Colorado wildfires, to really try to understand, you know, whether we should be planting or even collecting seed and thinking about, you know, where things may be moving up or down. And that's in post-fire environments. So it's not a formal common garden study, but it's pretty close because it's across multiple elevations, and we are expanding that study in the coming year or so. And we also have some funding to do a social science study examining public opinion around reforestation. And an element of that is particularly assisted migration, which I think helps inform some of the science questions around seed collection as well. And I see somebody put the seed lot selection tool in here. That's a great one. On the resources and policy, I think a lot of these are discussing the New Mexico Reforestation Center. But does anybody have anything that they would like to, you know, explicitly call out?
I would ask Josh a specific question about that GNA he has, if that's all right. So you're specifically working with the RO to have seed collection, a policy made so that it makes it more streamlined across the region. How, I don't know if you know right now, but how would that work? Would it be private sector would be coming and collecting, and then we would purchase that seed from those collectors, or? Because
yeah, so
go ahead.
Sure. So there are a couple of pieces to it, and what we win, and this has been basically a 3-year discussion with Forest Service at this point to get where we are with it. Background is that there, for some years now, has been in existence a master good neighbor authority agreement between New Mexico's Energy, Minerals, Natural Resource Department's Forestry Division and R3 Forest Service. So this New Mexico Forestry Division, GNA, blanketly covers forest restoration activities across boundaries that MNRD Forestry Division is involved with that may occur on Forest Service sides of the fence. We've had for a few years an interpretation that language, that it's forest restoration, allows MNRD Forestry Division that we have an interpretation that covers seed collection, that it can cover planting, that it can cover a lot of reforestation related work. That, however, is a soft interpretation that doesn't specifically deal with reforestation. And that interpretation also didn't just give us like blanket collection access. They still wanted us to go through the typical district and forest level permitting and access issues. So the conversation, and I should mention that so if you're based on the Apache sitgraves, on the Arizona side, the current GNA on our side, New Mexico Forestry Division by Region 3, because that's a New Mexico state entity, that particular agreement doesn't carry over on the Arizona side of R3. And so I don't know what your GNAs look like, and we'd have to pull those and look at them specifically and do some interpretation to think about how that could help you work with other non-federal partners in your state. But in our case, that GNA, more than facilitating things in and of itself, it really served as a starting point to the discussion that we're having now. And this is kind of like the convoluted, I don't know, like umbrella or shell game kind of thing, where under the Reforestation Center, we are a partner with MNERD. MNERD has the GNA with Forest Service. And so then kind of within that nebulous group of agreements, we're negotiating a related seed collection specific authorization that would specifically grant to the New Mexico Reforestation Center partners the ability to collect on all 11 forests region-wide. And so we have kind of this interesting nest of agreements. And I guess couple to kind of wrap that up, one more thing to add. Part of the way that could work with us is a couple of ways. One, being able to collect on Forest Service land, but then also being able to access Forest Service seed banks, even though we're a non-Forest Service entity. So Owen right now, his nursery, to my knowledge, for the first time in history in this region, is a non-Forest Service nursery who has been granted access to the Forest Service seed bank to grow seedlings for planting on Forest Service land. Am I correct on that, Owen? Is that going through?
Yeah, we've already got the seeds sown and they're growing in the greenhouse right now.
Yeah, and so then the next practical layer of that, Rachel, that you'd be thinking about is the agreements that we have and that are under discussion for expanding would give us as the permit holder, the authorization holder, the right to extend that collection authority to third parties that we contract with, is one of the things that we're working to have written into that, because obviously most of us are going to be relying to one extent or another on, partner organizations that we're working with, community groups that we're working with to facilitate these collections. And so that's definitely something important to be thinking about as we're all negotiating these access agreements. I'm happy to chat offline sometime too, because we're definitely interested in figuring out how to make this work for the Arizona side as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. Great question, Rachel. So I did see Anna Shuttles added that she is working on a limber pine common garden study. I'm assuming that that's going to be here in Colorado and that there's a sister planting in Alberta, Canada. That's very, very cool. I would love to learn more about that. So we've got about 2 more minutes for this discussion, and I wanted to just open it for anybody else who has, any existing resources that they know of, opportunities that they know of that they would like to share with the group. And then we'll close for the day here in just a minute or two.
I don't know if this is necessarily resources, but I guess I would like to highlight, American Forest has been involved in the development of the California Reforestation Strategy through Governor Newsom's Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force. And one of the outcomes of that has been that we have launched, along with CAL FIRE and Region 5, a reforestation pipeline partnership. And so that has essentially a few different goals, one of it which is to create a reforestation pipeline cooperative, a seed collection, a seed strategy for the state. So that includes private and federal lands and state lands. And then also the launch of a Conifer. So we have staff that are embedded within the CAL FIRE system and are collecting actively for CAL FIRE in the National Forest System. So if anyone's interested in learning a little bit more about that and how we've set that up, I would love to chat more with you all about it. I think it's been an incredibly effective way of increasing the amount of cone collection that's happening across federal lands, across Region 6 or Region 5, excuse me, and can serve as an example of how it could be effectively implemented in other locations as well. So if anybody has any questions or would like to reach out, please do.
Awesome. Thanks, Libby. That's great.
Hi everyone, I'm Kayla. I was just going to jump in and follow up what Libby said. I've been quiet mostly because I've been listening in to think about this, but I just want to bring up the collection, the cone collection permits. So I currently am the National Seed Specialist for the Forest Service and was just brought on in the last couple of months. And one of the things that I've been talking to the Washington office is the lack of a quality cone collection permit system. And so that's been one of the things that we're very aware of and has been kind of brought up to that highest level. So I put some info in the chat, but particularly Josh, I might reach out to you. But I would love to hear kind of maybe some of the roadblocks that you're having in terms of how we can do this. Because, one of the things is there is nothing in our, commercial use permitting system. So it's really difficult when folks at the district office are approached because they don't know what to call this. So if we can set something up at a national level that's just there and available so that when those district staff who maybe are not ologists are approached, then it's easy on them and they have it available. So just not surprised to hear it. It's been on my radar for a couple years, even before I started this position, and is high on everybody's radar now in the Washington office. But just wanted to say hi. I really appreciate all the information in this session, and it's been really, really valuable.
Thank you so much, Kayla. That's really great to hear. Awesome. Okay, well, we are running towards the end. So I just wanted to say, Brooke, maybe you could turn the whiteboard off unless people are still playing in it. I just wanted to sincerely thank everyone for your time, your insights, your questions, and really helping us to think through what some of these barriers are. Our plan is to take all of this information. We will follow up with you with a summary of the conversation as well as a link to this conversation if you want to share it. And that summary that we will create, we will be sharing widely with a lot of folks locally in the Southwest region, as well as with some of our partners and collaborators, both in the Western US, but also nationally. And particularly, my hope is that some of this trickles up to some of the policy level in particular. So we will follow up with that. And then I think that one of the main ideas out of this workshop was to identify some future trainings, tutorials, webinars, workshops, et cetera, that can start to address some of these pieces in more detail. So we will definitely follow up with those opportunities as they come up. But thank you so much to everyone. Really, really appreciate all of your time and insights. And unless anybody has any final thoughts, I'll say thank you so much and have a wonderful rest of your day. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you all. Bye. Bye for now.
Marion, you still there?
I'm still here.
Hey, I meant to mention this earlier and I totally forgot, but I took part in a webinar a couple weeks ago. I'm not sure whether you're aware of it or not. That's why I'm mentioning it. It was a final report put out by the National Academy